David Andrew Moore. I'm here with Tom Dowd from Strange Changes. We're here to talk about the newest release, Pigeons and Rats.
That's the one.
So why don't you tell us a little bit how were you inspired by it, then encouraged you to come up with this?
Musically, it was the Dillinger Escape Plan. Back when I wrote the piece, it was years ago when I started writing it. We had done a cover of one of their songs in sort of this proggy, jazzy sort of style, and it did very well on YouTube. And of course, I've always loved their music, and so doing the cover allowed me to sort of make a hybrid of the sort of mathy vocabulary that they've popularized with some of the more sort of like prog and fusion elements that you get in Strange Changes, and I wanted to keep exploring that in writing. I'm also a big fan of acts like Mr. Bungle or Naked City, both of which I'm channeling a little bit. And I was also listening to a lot of Charles Ives at the time, so there are these kind of like interludes almost that occur in the piece where the drums and the rhythm section will drop out, and we'll have these sort of experimental melodic structures, and a lot of that was me trying to live up to the late great Charles Ives.
Like blocks of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed right from the first listen of the piece, it seemed like almost a collage of different musical ideas strung together, but yet it hangs together nicely because of general pantonality that happens throughout, and there's a certain from a production side, there's certain sounds that are consistent despite the melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic shifts that seem to happen throughout the piece.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's a hallmark of good sort of modernist writing, is that idea that you can take something that sounds like total chaos or madness, but you can use musical structure that's sort of just below the surface, that's hidden a little bit from your immediate conscious perception to sort of tie the whole thing together. So in Pigeons and Rats, for example, the whole thing is kind of like in the key of F sharp. Like if you took like an F sharp altered chord, there are some sections where it goes to other sort of sounds of tonalities, but right off the bat, that's what you get, and the closing is using that same material and sort of this Mr. Bungle funk metal apocalypse sort of approach. So yeah, it's kind of vaguely tonal in that it has sort of like an F sharp bluesy or F sharp altered dominant kind of sound with a lot of chromaticism and cluster chords kind of throughout.
So when you're writing a piece like that, where you have this harmonic sound you like, and then you're also chopping up the piece into all distinct musical ideas, do you see like an overarching form before you begin, or do you just kind of write one thing that you like and then stick something next to that that juxtaposes it?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are both probably valid ways of skinning the cat. Like, I'm sure people have written similar pieces of music.
You do?
Yeah, for my purposes here, I actually tried to make this structurally chaotic. In fact, the first thing I did was write down a sketch of the lyrics. So some of the lyrics in the song, particularly the dream sequence, was sort of improvised later, or the stuff at the end that's like this like weird Slavoj Žižek impression. That was kind of improvised like later on. But my initial idea for the piece was to write this little essay about how everyone hangs their shit on pigeons and rats or whatever. So I just wrote out that text and made sure it didn't rhyme, it didn't have any meter, didn't have any real function. It was almost like a bad stand-up comedy bit that I wrote and just set to music. So I consciously tried to make sure the structure was just nuts by writing a bunch of lyrics that I knew I wasn't going to be able to make them fit sort of a conventional structure. So it started as a text setting, basically.
Yeah, your use of spoken word in the piece is also almost like characterizations. It changes with the music. Like there's distinct narrative voices that pop up.
Yeah, right, and yeah, that was kind of fairly organic. I mean, I started with the piece, I started with the written lyrical piece, sort of, and then kind of started slapping these metal guitar riffs together over it, and then started just sort of improvising takes of the lyrics, and as I said, we added some other stuff. So yeah, it was a process designed to not be all that coherent or to have a ton of structure, Although I think some elements of the way I wrote it bring that structure back together.
So for you, it's the process is kind of a lyrical theme that's sets a tone, and by a tone I don't mean just the tonality, I mean a mood.
Right.
Then you come up with like a guitar thing that accompanies that, and then you orchestrate that for the ensemble.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say that's actually a pretty good, it's not a hard and fast rule, but I'd say that's a pretty good template for the way I approach writing for Strange Changes, period. Is that Strange Changes is kind of a vehicle for me to create these more abstract ideas and write around them. I mean, I'm someone who, I struggle to commit to musical ideas. I throw away lots of stuff that probably I should keep or use to write songs. And I have a tendency to need some big abstract idea or some purpose or point in order to hang all these smaller musical ideas on and start really building a piece. And that's particularly true for Strange Changes. I do some more writing in a jazzy or singer-songwriter sense where it's a little more just right from the gut. But Strange Changes exists to do that. That's kind of why that project. It's why I have that project.
Wow. So the editorial process is as big a piece of it as everything else.
Yeah. It's it's very heavily editorial. I mean, and that's something, you know too, when you write for a larger ensemble, and I actually got to play on David's new record with the Argonauts recently, so he did a little bit of arranging for it. It was a 6-piece, but with some overdubs.
Yeah, quite a
for
few
Jacob.
overdubs.
Yeah. This tune, Frabato, that you can check out on his web pages and stuff. When you write charts at that level, it's a lot of editing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of sitting down, and thankfully we have modern technology. Programs like Finale and Sibelius allow you to listen back to your arrangements and double check all the transpositions, and you're getting the right notes on. But when you write for a bigger ensemble, it's a lot of that. Especially a piece as complex as Pigeons and Rats. I don't get even a fraction of the rehearsal time with the full Strange Changes band that I'd like to. So the idea of trying to bring people in and let everyone do their own part writing on a piece like that it's laughable. If none of us had jobs and we spent 5 or 6 days a week playing together, we could and would probably write that way. But really, from the start of the band, I've had to come in with very well prepared charts. So
it's not like a classical ensemble though. Like Cats are interpreting things and they're giving their own take to parts and.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's like a hybrid between classical and jazz. This is maybe where my influence from Charles Mingus becomes a little more prominent, because he would score things out sometimes in great detail, but still leave a fair bit of room for interpretation. As a drummer, that drummers usually have the longest leash in terms of scoring out for rock, jazz, pop ensembles in many ways, because. Drummers have a fair bit of latitude for what specific arrangement they'll use for their kit and the way they like to play, and micromanaging them with, written out parts is often pretty counterproductive in terms of rehearsals. That being said, there are some points, when I write for Strange Changes, I do often write out full score drum beats, not necessarily with the idea that they're gospel, but just because I want to hear them played back in MIDI in the compositional process and to get the drummer kind of in the ballpark. I would say generally the drummer and maybe the rhythm section a little more broadly tend to have more leash in terms of interpreting or comping their parts, like in the way a jazz player would approach it. Whereas, the horn players have to be more specific. They have points where they're asked to improvise or solo in this piece, but generally they're doing a little less of their own orchestrating and arranging from the chart anyway.
So when I first heard this piece, the sonic palette to me, it struck me as quite different from what you've done in the past with Strange Changes. From a production perspective, was that a conscious choice?
Well, we did use a different engineer for this. We used a guy named Andrew Nault. Typically, the trombone player Jeff Nielsen has been the main go-to guy for Strange Changes, but I have some other projects I'm working through with him right now, and this was just kind of a one-off. And we chose to work with Nault, and he's a really talented guy. He plays guitar in a doomcore band called, I might have gotten the genre name wrong, so don't sue me, internet, called Lesser Glow. and he produces some acts around here. The band Chuggernaut has this massive power metal record they released where he did all the work. So he's someone who just had some cachet with other metal and mathcore type acts. He was recommended to me by multiple people. So we went with him, yeah, and I think he's going for like a more balls to the wall, angry, raw sound. I think Strange Changes does that in bursts throughout its output, you know, that will have these short bursts of that kind of chaotic math rocky feel, but this is definitely the most sustained sort of creation of that type, I guess.
Can we expect more of that direction in the future?
A little bit, you know, I mean, there's certainly doing more blast beats and Strange Changes than we used to. The next piece we've recorded is like a very long proggy piece called a Genesis that uses that stuff. I've kind of been exploring using it almost more like the way I feel like someone like Stravinsky would use it, which is to say you do these passages where the percussion instruments are just blasting out all the rhythms inherent in the melody along with a melodic instrument, and we explore that in the new Strange Changes piece in sort of a mathcore style, where you have the guitars take over the melody and the drums will just blast along with them. So yeah, it's a palette I'm using a bit more than I used to, that's for sure.
Is that in part influenced by your drummer Steve's approach?
You know, I think it's just that. Yeah, you know, I don't think he'd really played much of that stuff at all before playing with Strange Changes. And Strange Changes will do that to you. As David has played with us before too, so he knows that we take everyone and force them out of their comfort zones.
Well outside. Pushing well outside that comfort zone.
But no, I don't think Steve had done much of it either. I mean, I think it was already kind of circulating in the Strange Changes repertoire. He had to learn, you know, what with the Dillinger cover I mentioned earlier. You can see on YouTube our version of Baby's First Coffin is on the YouTube channel. That piece has a lot of blast beat in it, obviously. So he had to add that to his vocabulary. And like I said, we got a good reaction. We really loved playing the piece. I like being able to mix that really, really violent, angry intensity that comes out of the blast beats with things you don't maybe get as much out of the use of it in the sort of like grindcore heritage.
Sure.
You know, you can use it with more melodic concepts or use it in other contexts. I like using it, as I said in this next piece, you're going to hear it used almost more melodically, you know, using it to accent or to double the melody. So yeah, I'm just trying to explore it. You know, we've added it to the band's overall vocabulary. It's in some of the repertoire now, so I may as well use it in the writing. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the harmonic content of Pigeons and Rats, is this so a lot of your other music, it's much more I want to say modal, and then there's sections of atonality, whereas this piece you launch right into that altered chord and then clusters of notes right
yeah. There's no firm earth to set your feet on.
Was that did you just liked that sound and you felt like it resonated with what you were doing lyrically, or is that a direction you'd like to go more of? Is that
Yeah, I think it's just kind of on a case by case basis, you know, that Strange Changes it sets scenes, you know, and I'm not really interested in committing to sort of one tonal vocabulary or the other. You know, this is a piece that was just like really angry and twisted throughout, so I think the harmony stayed fractured throughout all of it. But that's definitely not the case. The next piece, a Genesis that'll come out next year probably, really plays with that. You know, it goes from being completely, you know, tonal, just basic triadic harmony to turning everything upside down and backwards, you know, polytonal stuff or stuff without a clear fixed key center, sort of in more of a Frank Zappa style. So, yeah, you just take it as it comes. You know?
So for young musicians out there who want to, maybe there's a young guy like yourself who doesn't have his Strange Changes, doesn't have his ensemble yet, but he's trying to learn some of these composition techniques, ways of employing them in a rock band, for lack of a better term. What advice would you give somebody?
Well, the hardest part is getting people to show up for rehearsal. So there's only so much I can help you with on that front. I would say in terms of writing, you know, you'll know if you have it. You know, if you're a writer, you can't not write. And even before I could really read and write music, I was like forcing my high school age friends to play these long Zappa style stream of consciousness pieces where we had to memorize and through compose it. So, you know, the important thing is getting your friends or getting some people in the room and making them play it over and over and over and over again. I mean, that's really the core of it. That being said, you know, regardless of playing in a band, you know, there's so many tools open to composers now that allow you to self-produce or at least hear like a reasonable facsimile or a reasonable demo of what you're writing. It's something that we have to take advantage of. So you know, I would say, you know, get whatever it is, man. It can be GarageBand, it can be Logic, it can be notation software like Sibelius or Finale, and just start playing. You know, that's the beauty of it, is that for centuries composers had to put these dots on the page and either sit at a piano or hear it in their ear or have someone play it back, and now you can be alone in your room and you can get the playback right away. It's a new world out there, you know.
And of course, taking into account the musicians you have, what instruments they play,
Absolutely.
writing things that are learning about orchestration techniques. I mean, I know you went to Berklee College of Music, but that's not required, of course.
No.
But I mean, you learn the palette you're working
Yeah,
with.
right. You want to play in your high school band and, you know, learn how the trumpet player produces his notes and learn the ranges of the instruments and learn the idiosyncrasies. You know, you have to understand how loud the instruments are in proportion to each other. You have to understand their tone. You have to understand how they're going to sound different in different ranges at different volumes. You know, there's a lot to work on there, but it comes with experience. You know, the most important thing is to just get the ideas out there and start working on them and you know, fail upwards.
So inserting the horn section into extreme metal styles, that's not something a lot of other people have explored. When you first started doing that, did you have difficulties figuring out how to orchestrate that, or was it something that you just had a feeling for?
No, I mean, I think it's like pure Naked City, right? If you guys don't know the John Zorn Act, Naked City, definitely check it out. They have a couple CDs, one of which is self-titled. I think the first one is just called Naked City. But they were a band that sort of explored a mixture of sort of American pop sax with more avant approaches to the saxophone. And that's because the rhythm section, a lot like Strange Changes, would rapidly alter between jazzy or punk or grindcore or pop sounds or basic rock sounds.
But they were much more improvised.
There was a lot more improv. It was a smaller ensemble, but I think, you know, that you know, I would just, for me, when I use sax in these metal pieces, I'm not really a metal vocalist. Like, I'll yell, but I'm not really a screamer.
Right.
So, you know, the beauty is that the sax can really do that. They can overblow. They can create these blood-curdling squeals and screams. And so those are tonalities that work, or I shouldn't say tonalities, they're sonorities that work pretty well with metal or grindcore sound. So I've always just kind of, you know, let them off the leash. It's a lot of, like, on the score. I think the score for Pigeons and Rats says "squeal like a pig" at one point. And you know, you will definitely see markings like those in John Zorn's scores if you look them over. You know, lots of swear words and strange phrases trying to evoke responses from the performers.
Drawings even.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, well, you'll see all kinds of stuff in John Zorn's scores. Mine are tamer than his, honestly. But yeah, so I think it's been done a bit. You do it, you know, it's tough orchestration wise, especially if you're playing smaller stages or without powerful PAs. I mean, you know, saxes are a lot quieter than a metal rhythm section. You know, guitars, bass, and drums ripping over some metal or some mathcore kind of stuff. It's just a lot louder. So that is one concern. You know, I think the brass, trumpet, and trombone handle the volume a lot better than the saxophones. But you know, fortunately you have PAs that can account for that. But it is something to think about when you're writing for performance.
Yeah. So do you have any shows coming up?
You know, Strange Changes, we're working on something for the spring in Boston that I haven't announced yet. I've still got to nail down some details. So soon enough, soon enough we will. I mean, I'm gonna have some stuff coming out on my own name. I'm also setting up a release show for the spring for a full-length jazz record that I'm putting out. It's basically the Strange Changes rhythm section, except doing some more of this sort of like groove jazz, Schofieldy kind of things.
And what's that called?
That's just going to be under Tom Dowd Group, under my name, and we're working on another full-length vocal record that will feature the same musicians too. But I'm kind of waiting till I get those releases dialed up to do shows and stuff like that.
Excellent.
But yeah, absolutely. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Be sure to subscribe. Also, be sure to check out David Andrew Moore's work with the Arkanauts elsewhere on YouTube. What's the Arkanauts webpage?
TheArkanauts.com.
All right, there you go.
First album just came out, Initiation.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Tom's
I
on it.
got to play a couple tracks. You'll hear Evan from Strange Changes and Greg from Strange Changes as well. The aforementioned Jeffrey Nielsen produced and recorded that record. So good stuff all around. Thanks for tuning in.
Featuring the great Albano the Madman.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
The one and only. Yeah, great playing all around. And Eric Van Dam, actually.
Eric Van Dam, also of Strange Changes. So.
That's right. It's a family affair. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Check out the new single, and don't hang your shit on pigeons and rats. Later. All right, man.
There's some content there.
Yeah, totally, man. That's all it needs to be, you know?